Well, I am here with Andrew Boss. Well, really, I should welcome you back to the UT campus. And again, I do want to thank you for sharing some of your time back here in Austin with me and for this interview, and then subsequently with Symphony Band as well. So, Andrew Boss is an incredible mind, an incredible composer. Before the University of Texas, in which you were studying here, you were at the Peabody Institute studying with Putz, and then before that, you studied piano performance, correct?
Yes.
So, going back, even before that time, was there an earlier time in which you began to realize, I want to pursue composition, or composition is the thing that I will get into?
Well, thanks for having me here, Jonathan. It's great to be back. It's kind of like I never left.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, I'll start out with a little aside, a little funny story. And I usually tell people that the first thing I ever wrote was something I wrote when I was 18 months old. And it was on one of those toy pianos, like those really irritating sounding instruments that you buy for your kids only to realize that you made a huge mistake later on.
For ages 3 and up.
Yeah, right. And so I would just sort of play the same little thing over and over again. And it went down the lines of ya-dee-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it over and over and over again until everybody left the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people that was my first minimalistic piece.
Interesting.
And actually, my wife sort of came up with that little joke, so I kind of stole it from her. But anywho, so I suppose technically I was always sort of thinking about, creating music on some level. Having said that, though, I didn't really do my first composition lesson until I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, especially when I was learning the piano, I would always improvise.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed improvising, and not necessarily in the jazz sense, just
Mm-hmm.
free improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
So with sort of all that going on in my background, although I was still trained to be a concert pianist, and whatever that means nowadays, I was always still creating music was always sort of in the back of my mind, and eventually that did take over once I realized that, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and maybe I should give it a shot. And that officially, that became official when I applied to Peabody for composition.
Excellent. Uh-huh. So you have the experience from piano performance in Florida. Like you said, your experience and your compositional training at Peabody, and then that continued here at the University of Texas. What would you describe your sound as, your kind of compositional style and sound as?
Well, I think a lot of composers can relate to this when I say, well, I describe my sound as a work in progress.
Okay.
Because it never really is fully molded. I'll probably give you the same answer by the end of my life. But I suppose that's probably not the answer you're looking for in some sense. And but in all honesty, my style is still progressing. At the moment, I sort of go back and forth between tonal and atonal styles, usually with some sort of tonal ending of sorts, or bitonal. So I'm sort of in between those writing styles, but I don't necessarily limit myself to one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There are some pieces that I've written that are completely absent of a tonal center, although you wouldn't necessarily say atonal. And there are other pieces that have key signatures. So, I suppose it's the question of will the real Andrew Boss please stand up? But again, I suppose that goes back to the original answer, where it's always, for me, it's always progressing. I'm always trying to find a way to get out of my comfort zone. And that's also a part of the restlessness of the progression of one's writing style, is it never really rests.
Right.
It's really our duty never to get overly comfortable in our little writing zones, even if it's a piece that we discover that is very successful.
Mm-hmm.
It's tempting to sort of entrap ourselves into a writing style that may be more successful than another.
Right.
So,
but going back to this is 2019, and you know you're here in Austin for this what will be the second premiere of your Third Symphony. I want to scoot back a few years now, going back to 2015, to your composition of Alama Show, primarily featuring the music inspiration from Guillaume Michaud. Can you tell us about this piece? How did this come about, first and foremost?
Well, I always enjoy starting with a little joke, and the first thing I'll say is if anybody who's listening to this actually speaks French, you would know that the title is not correct grammatically. Allah is not the appropriate French preposition or whatever you call it. That would go before that. I think it's something else. Somebody told me who it was, and I forgot what it was, but I know that it's not exactly the way it should be. And let's be honest, but it does sound catchy the way it is. So that's the sort of the biggest reason why I decided to ignore the grammatical mistake there. So there's that. But as far as what sort of driven me to write it, a friend of mine, a wonderful pianist, Robert Fleitz, he studied at Juilliard, and he had this awesome idea where he was going to ask all the composers he knew to write one variation of a theme.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had the privilege of being one of the composers, and so I wrote a variation to a theme, and there were about 12 other composers who also wrote a variation to a theme. And the theme was Dulce Jamais Jolie,
Yes.
Sweet Lovely Lady. And it's that very rhythmically catchy one, that and I heard this for the first time, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And to my surprise, it was that all the syncopations were originally from the score.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're sort of fussing over, why does he write such syncopated stuff, like that saxophone line, and near the end, where the piece reiterates all the melodies at once. Why do you do that? I did not do that,
he
saxophonist. That's mostly on him.
Yes.
So, just so you know who you're blaming, as you're sort of fumbling through the spot, wondering, oh my God, was it me? 10, maybe 15% was, but at least 80% was originally. I forgot which specific section, but it was most of the syncopations are from him. I believe it's from the Mass.
Mm-hmm.
I heard these melodies, and I started doing some more research on some of his other stuff, and I came across Since I Am Forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, for those of you who are sort of adding these melodies up, Since I Am Forgotten, Sweet Lovely Lady. Okay, Alama Show is obviously a love song. Anyway, Sweet Lovely, Since I Am Forgotten. That's sort of the very lyrical hymn chanson that opens the piece, opens Alama Show, and it was just beautiful. And I actually heard it before in like a music history class that I took ages ago that I almost forgot about, except for that little spot where that's really neat sounding lyrical melody, and I revisited it when I was sort of searching for some other themes to add to it. I'm like, oh cool, I want to add this too, so I'll just steal it like every good composer does and make it into my own thing. And having said all this, when I was writing the variations that for the pianist I originally was telling you about, I decided to incorporate the Sweet Lovely Lady, Since I Am Forgotten, and parts of the Mass.
Mm-hmm.
So actually I did, the way I made the variation for him was very similar, had most of all the themes that I ended up using for Alama Show.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I wrote that variation, I wanted to expand on it further, so out of that came this 6-minute work for wind ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
And it went a slightly different direction, which was I couldn't have asked for anything better. I didn't want to simply take these variations and do the exact same thing except longer, and so it sort of went its own direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the time, I was very happy with the way it came out, and for me, again, it was a lot about just what's that E word? A lot about exposing young students to great music
Mm-hmm.
from composers who are not often known or studied.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it forms such both a beautiful work, but such a in a way, I think the artistry in it is it can be so complex yet so simple, as it's so far-reaching, and it's incredible to see what you have done with his music in this new piece. And you certainly, you use the kind of percentage earlier of the 10% or the 80% or the 20% before, but the part that is you in this work is absolutely wonderful, and we look forward to not only studying it but certainly performing it as well. So, in closing, again, I do want to thank you so much for your time and for your insight into this work, and we look forward to sending you a copy of the performance.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you again for taking the time to interview me, and I look forward to listening in on the process of you guys learning it and bringing it to life.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.